Mark Leonard, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. You are actually the first JUCO coach I am interviewing on this podcast. We've had other divisions and levels, and it's just nice to provide everyone with a new perspective on just the college recruiting process and what to look for in certain programs and maybe who should even consider JUCO. And I just feel like this isn't touched on enough because a lot of people are fixated on the D1 dream and just going to these like bigger name schools. So this is going to be such an important discussion. And if you can just quickly give a background on your coaching journey and then the college program you're with now.
Thank you again for having me. I'm going now. I was doing the math. I'm over 20 years now coaching, and it's been a very exciting journey. And the fact that I started back, gosh, it was like around 2003, 2004, and I remember I think it was the YMCA needed coaches at the time. They needed volunteers, so I went in and I helped out, and then from there I started. I was at Wesley Chapel Soccer Club back when that club started. I think in like '04. I was coaching there. Worked at Greater Tampa Bay FC, which used to be Central Pasco United. You probably remember that name from Land O'Lakes days, and then went over back over to Wesley Chapel, and then I was at Florida Premier up until around like 2017, and then got the job at Wesley Chapel High. I was coaching high school for about 6 years, and then the PHSC position came open. And the program's going into year 4 this fall, and I came in a few weeks into year 2, and now I've been doing that ever since. And I mean, everywhere I've been, I've enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the high school experience. I don't think the high school experience gets enough credit that it deserves and what it offers the players. But I'm really enjoying the college and the difference that we can make with these student athletes.
And can you let everyone know what PHSC stands for and where it's exactly located in the Tampa area?
Yes, it's Pasco Hernando State College. We have a campus in Wesley Chapel, the Porter campus, which is about 10 years old. The main campus is over in Newport Richey. We have Dade City, and then we also have Brooksville.
I was at the campus a few months ago when I came out to speak to your girls, and it's a really great campus and it just looks like a great college experience. I was walking around and just seeing some of the classes and seeing what was going on. I think I was in like the nursing and medical building and it just
Yes.
looked really cool. So, yeah, that was a cool experience and it was great to talk to your girls. They were really excited and motivated to get better, and I just kind of want you to speak to the level that you're playing at and the other teams that are in your conference?
That's that's a great question, and that's I think there's kind of a misperception is the level of competition that's at the junior college level. And when I came on at PHSC, we were the only JUCO Division two team in the state of Florida, and we were in our own region. And then last year, Pensacola State came in, so we actually have a pathway to the playoffs now. But when I came in, we were playing all the Division One schools. We were playing Polk State, we were playing Daytona State, we were playing Eastern Florida State. Which my first year when we went to go play them, they were defending national champions. So that was quite a task going in and playing them. But that's our main schedule. And then like this upcoming season, we're playing Pensacola State, obviously, and now we're adding in some schools from North Carolina that are JUCO Division two teams. But we still have our home and aways with Daytona, with Polk State, and with Eastern Florida State.
Yeah, Polk State is a really good program. I have a girl who's going to play there in the fall, and she didn't envision playing JUCO, but then when she met the coach and team, she was like, "Wow, this is for me." And I do want you to touch on that because I think a lot of girls like JUCO is like their last option or they're not even considering it because of that perception. And I know even some club coaches will tell players, well, you're above a JUCO program, which I think is, I mean, I get it if maybe they're like a top 25 D1 player,
Yes.
but it's like, it's so crazy that coaches still say that and these girls can still have good competition and develop as players for the next 4 years. So maybe just speak to girls who haven't considered JUCO why they might want to.
Basically, I mean, at the end of the day, it's to get an education. I mean, that's what we're all here for. And I love the podcast you do when you're talking about that, especially when Don talks about that too. And I love the phrase "right fit." The first time I heard that, I'm like, that couldn't be more fitting. And when I meet with parents and players in that initial meeting, I tell them, find yourself the right fit academically, financially, and athletically. Because having two older ones that went through the recruiting experience, went through searching for colleges, I mean, finances are huge. The area of study are huge. For junior college, and especially with the pricing of these schools now and how much it costs to go to them, junior college, just from a financial standpoint, the cost is less for those first 2 years. Plus, if you're a scholarship athlete at PHSC, now you've just cut your college expenses in half. From a playing standpoint, I was talking to a player a while back we used to have good battles against each other in high school. She played for kind of one of our opposing teams, and we always met in districts. And she made the comment to me, in hindsight, I would have loved to have stayed and played locally here because she had went away to a larger school. And I think playing time is huge as well. And that's kind of the I'll see people go and they sit for that first year, they sit that second year, and they don't even get to play. Whereas here at PHSC, you play those first 2 years. We video, or this upcoming fall, we're going to video all our games. We just got a trace system that they can put together their film, and then I'll help them if they want to go and play at a 4 year. So it's like you're getting that playing experience, you're getting that exposure, you're getting your education, and then you can transfer out. And I think that's the huge benefit. And you stay local. I think some people aren't ready maybe to go away to college because some go away and they're like, this is a culture shock, and they come back. Some of the players that are coming into our 24 class, they're very close to their family. They're not ready to go away yet. And they just get that education. And then, when you're 20, 19 or 20, then maybe you're ready to go on to a 4 year.
I've seen that a lot too. A lot of girls will go to a bigger school out of state and then they'll come back home the next season because they didn't realize how much they missed home or wanted to be at a smaller school and be a big fish in a small pond. And I agree with you that playing time too is important, and being able to be a part of a team that you can make an impact on and get some minutes, because I think most players do want to play. Very few are okay with just being a part of a roster. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's important to touch on. Now, as far as the transfers from JUCO, I don't know if you've heard Andre's story from SRUSA. He speaks a lot on Don's podcast about it, but he started at a JUCO program and then he transferred to Indiana, and they were a national championship team at the D1 level. So it does happen where players do transfer to big programs or even go pro. So, do you have any stories of girls who did kind of use JUCO as like a launching pad into that?
Well, being a young program right now, we're only 3 years in, but I have a player now that is playing up in Georgia after playing 2 years with us. I have another one that's transferring over to New College of Florida down in Sarasota, and another one that's looking at another school as well. So right now, I mean, that's kind of what we've had so far. But I mean, that's only in year one. I wasn't there in year one. There were only 10 girls on the roster. I think at one point maybe they had 11, and then when I came in year two, we only had like 18. So now we're just starting to build from the exposure of the, hey, there's actually a school here in Pasco County. So I'm hoping as the years grow, we have more stories. But right now we have that, like I said, we have that one going to Georgia, we have the one going to New College, but to that level of success, we haven't hit there yet. But there's players coming to my team that I really do believe probably got missed at because of the level they play in club. Whereas I think they, in my opinion, they probably should have been at a higher level in club, and it just got missed. So, but getting that playing time here at JUCO, getting the exposure, getting the film, being able to share that, I think it'll open up opportunities for them down the road.
That's pretty good for just a few years in to have those few players that are at those other programs. And I think like as far as getting missed, that is a very common scenario in the recruiting process, and it can be really frustrating for a lot of players. But for your recruiting, are you getting out to a lot of like high school and club games for the local girls?
Yes, I do both. Ironically, being in Florida, it's nice to go to the high school games because it's nighttime and the sun's not beating on you all day. But I enjoy that. Plus, I like seeing all the players and the teams I used to go against when we were in high school. But I do both. I was in Lakewood Ranch, gosh, maybe like a month or two ago, watching a tournament down there. I go to like if I see the big high school games here, like if I see Wiregrass and Cypress going against each other, or like I went to Chapel and Land O'Lakes. I'll go watch them. I'll go watch Sun Lake. I try to get out to the high school games too because I know one they're local. They're not traveling all over the state or they're not out of state going. So, but I will do both. And it's they say that coaches don't go to the high school games because I guess there's a stigma with high school as well. I go because there is as you know, there's very talented players and at the middle school level and at the high school level right now, and you can get some really fun games to watch.
And it makes the recruiting process really easy for you because you can just drive right down the road. And then for the players, they don't have to fly to an ID camp and spend hundreds of dollars. So it's just a win-win for everyone. And I think it's so important to touch on like the high school game recruiting. And I do know a lot of college coaches who do get out to those if you want to play locally, and players need to consider that because for those ID camps, parents only have a certain budget and time to get out to those. So that's also a really good option for players. Now, as far as the types of players you're recruiting into your program specifically, what are you looking for in terms of soccer performance and then just also overall character?
The word you ended with is the first word I look for. Is I go character first. Is that I look when I go to watch a game, and Don has mentioned this before, where he gets there early and he watches them warm up. I've seen him say that on Twitter. I'm X, I guess now, but I'll say he goes there and he watches. I do the same thing. I like to get there. I like to watch them warm up. I like to see what kind of effort they're putting in. I like to see how they interact with their teammates. Same thing when the game starts. How are they communicating? Is that communicating instructional or is it just screaming? And even when I'm recruiting, I'll talk to their high school coach or their club coach. How are they? Are they coachable? How do they respond to coaching? How do they respond to feedback? And then if I have the opportunity to, I'll talk to teammates as well because there's really that's the big part because if you don't have the character side, the playing side isn't even going to work because history has shown me that it only takes one or two bad maybe character issues can actually just make a team kind of domino effect to go down. Playing wise, I mean, it's all the things you look for that all the coaches look for as well. Is my player pool on the club side is pretty much ECNL, NPL. I know when I talk to a couple ECNL players, you can tell the interest just isn't there because I think the expectation is set that you're going higher than this. I had one player tell me one time, sorry, coach, I'm not going to play at your level, and I appreciated the candor, but it set the expectation. But I mean, it's interesting, is that and I invite you to come out to our training sessions in the fall. Is there is a lot of talented players at our school, and the level of play is very strong. But we're just that's kind of I mean it's character first, and then I look at everything else after that.
That's really interesting with the ECNL players. And I think this is a misconception and kind of how people are being led astray with the whole ECNL label is that just because you play ECNL means that all these D1 schools are going to be chasing you down and knocking on your door and that's where you're going to go. But I've seen many ECNL girls. I've gotten messages from many ECNL parents who are like, "Oh, we're actually like going to like D3 or JUCO, and we're kind of shocked. And I'm like, well, I'm not really shocked because it's competitive. There's a lot of good players out there. And I think that's a lie that's being sold to these ECNL players, that you deserve D1, you're entitled to this, you're entitled to that, and they just don't consider JUCO at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, at the D1 level, I don't know if when parents are looking at these schools is, and it's not every D1, but if you look at the D1s, I mean, I think probably first thing they look at is maybe like transfer portal. Then they go and they look at internationals. And then, I mean, it's like realistically, the showcases, you look at some of the ECNL players, if they find out they're not being recruited, or if you haven't heard from a Division 1 coach, you know, I love what you just said. You know, sometimes it's not surprising. Just because you play ECNL doesn't mean you're going to be playing at a D1 school. And it's funny. There's so many great schools out there that are D2, that are D3. You know, I remember my daughter. I grew up in Baltimore, so you know, you went to Hopkins. I remember at one point we were talking about her looking Johns Hopkins, and I think I shared with you recently about the situation with Richmond. She was up at Richmond, but we went up there. We did ID camps and stuff. But you can be identified at ID camps. You can be identified. You know, there's multiple avenues than just the ECNL level.
Yeah, and this isn't to say that we are anti-ECNL here.
Correct.
Mark has spoken highly of the league. I have as well in other episodes. And yes, I think the competition is excellent. I think you do get more college exposure than other leagues. And there's like 30 to 40 college coaches at a game, and it's great. And a lot of the coaches are great. And a lot of my girls who play it are happy with their coaches and they're happy with their teammates. But what we're saying is, just because you are ECNL doesn't mean it's a guarantee you're going to have some of these big schools hunting you down and asking you to play for their program. And I don't think club coaches and just clubs overall are honest enough with players, and they're telling them they deserve certain things because they are ECNL. There are so many girls who are in that league, and it is cutthroat competitive, and there is not a spot on a D1 program for everyone.
No, you're absolutely right, and great, you know, clarity on that too. Because like you look, we were just talking about there's a big showcase in North Carolina this weekend. I mean, what great exposure for those ECNL players. I mean, I see on Twitter, hey, from these coaches heading to North Carolina, heading to North Carolina. It's flooded with coaches. It's flooded with exposure. And I think a part that doesn't get talked about either is that, you know, they're talking about, I want to play soccer, I want to play at this school, but what are your grades like? How are you as a student? Things like, I mean, there are things that, you know, don't really get discussed.
That's true too, especially for a lot of the Ivy Leagues and the baby Ivies. If you're like a US Youth National Team player, ECNL team player, and you don't have a 4.0 or higher or a 1500 on your SAT or higher, a lot of those Ivy Leagues and baby Ivies won't accept you, no matter how good you are, because that's just how admissions is now for athletes. So I'm glad you touched on grades, because grades are going to get you way further than soccer.
Yes.
You know, pro soccer is great. It's a great goal to go for, but not everyone will make it. And even if you do make it, your career will end one day and you're going to have to enter the real world and get a real person job. So
Yes.
you have to be a well rounded student too.
No, that's a great point. And one of the things I've said over the years to players is that this game will end for you sometime, whether it ends in middle school, whether it ends in club, whether it ends in high school, junior college, it will end. What are you falling back on when it does end? I mean, there's such a small percentage. You mentioned pro. There's such a small percentage that move on and play pro. I know a couple local players here recently just signed pro contracts. That's amazing. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment for them. But that's not the whole. And I think some people all look at that, and it's like you got to make sure you have those grades. I mean, even the local Florida schools now, they're difficult to get into as well. I mean, just from a grades testing standpoint.
I think with the pro level, it's just we're not preparing these athletes for that transition when it ends. Because to get to that level, like your focus does have to mainly be that sport at times, and like not really thinking about everything else. But the closer you get to that retirement, there has to be some preparation. Okay, what am I going to do next? And even athletes like Serena Williams, when she retired and transitioned into becoming a mother and doing other things, like it was a shock for her. Like she was floored. I mean, she wrote a whole article on it and how hard it was. And I think we need to help our athletes more at that pro level to just kind of prepare, because you want to think it's going to go on forever, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. I remember reading an article. This is a while back about totally different sport, but Alabama football, and they said under Nick Saban, the boys were so structured for 4 years. They knew this is when you eat, this is when you study, this is when you do this. And then for those that didn't move on to the NFL, they were lost because they didn't have like a structure in place or anything. It was done for them. And then it's like you said, now we're in real world. Now we have a real job, and what do you do? And I exactly what you said. I think there needs to be a better foundation laid out there to, hey, what if not this, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, even that transition from college into pro is so crazy, especially with like the financial part of it. I think there's a Netflix documentary on how many pro athletes went bankrupt from just living like rock stars. It's actually pretty wild. So athletes aren't prepared for that either when you get to that level. So that's something else people need to be considering.
Yes, talking about humble is that I just saw a picture the other day. Jalen Hurts, who plays quarterback
Mhm.
for the Eagles, they showed the house he lives in. It's a very, very modest home. Here's a guy that just signed a $255 million contract, but he still lives in a very modest home. And it's like, you know what? That's someone who gets it and knows that, hey, this could end at any moment.
Yeah, I've seen athletes like that, and I love that. Like, you would never, like, guess they were, like, rich, like, walking on the street, and there's, a female athlete I follow who has a podcast, and she, like, posted on one of her stories, how she was just, like, flying, like, regular economy Southwest Airlines, and someone DM'd her and was like, "Why aren't you flying private jets?" And she responded, "Because I'm not stupid with my money." And I love that. She's, like, making millions from, like, sponsorships and everything, and I'm like, "Dang, that is awesome." She's just flying basic economy.
Yes, you're getting to the same place that the people are paying more money for, but
Yeah,
the destination is the same.
it's
So,
so
no, that's
true.
great. That's a great story.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to consider with everything as far as college and going pro, and I want you to speak to, before we wrap up, like, what are some of the struggles you have with being the coach of a new JUCO program, and how are you trying to solve them?
The biggest one, and it kind of goes to the heart of this podcast, is it's the stigma. I mean, fighting the stigma of the playing at the junior college level, and I know it's difficult to explain to at times maybe to a family or to a kid. And I call them kids, but they're 18, 19 years old. But here's the benefits, and this is how it will help you long term. And just trying to bring those people in. And what I appreciate though is that the players that have come on, I know there's some that I've been recruiting, and maybe months went by where they just really, you could tell they were still thinking about it, and then eventually it just set in, and like I'll have calls and meetings with the player and the parent, and just explain all the benefits of going coming to PHSC. And then eventually they're like, you know what, this is the best fit for us. This is for right now. This is where we need to be. But it's just getting everybody to kind of, you know, not on my current team, but like players you're recruiting and parents you're talking to, is getting them to look past the junior college stigma as you try to grow the program. But it's great because each year I've seen the program grow. And I'd mentioned a player who just didn't even know we had it, and we're in our backyard. We've been here for 3 years, but getting that message out, but just getting them to look past, the perception of what JUCO has. It's a great. I mean, there's quality competitive soccer at this level. On the flip side, I had somebody last year reach out to me who hasn't played in like 8 years, hasn't played soccer in like 8 years, and they're like, "Hey, can I just come and play?" And that's another misperception, is that you think that that's just the level that's at JUCO, and it's not.
Wow, that's surprising, like, assuming that the girls on your team, like, don't know how to play soccer,
Yep.
that's wild. Gosh, I can't even imagine that. Have you had girls, like, show up to maybe, like, a recruiting trip or they came in as freshmen and they were, like, shocked at how, like, intense and competitive it was?
This past season, it was my first season 3 was my first season where I had players that I had brought in, that I had recruited in, and then I also had the returning players from the prior coach, and I think it was one of our maybe first of our 3 sessions, one of the players came up to me and they're like, "This is so much better than it was last year." And it was just because, we're bringing in we were and it was no disrespect to the players before. When the program started, it was more kinda like, it was kinda just a tryout. If you showed up, pretty much they were just trying to build the program, but we didn't have position specific players. I remember when I came in a few weeks, it was maybe like 6 or 8 weeks into year 2. I was basically just putting players, hey, we have to put 11 on the field. This is what you're playing. Whereas now we're recruiting for position specific. But I remember that player, I said it was the first couple practices, and she goes, "This is so much better because now the quality was coming in and we were getting more of the competitive players."
That's awesome, and you're such a great coach, Mark. I mean, you've been doing this
Thank you.
for a couple decades or more now, and I think it's also important for girls to chase a good coach in a college program, and just because it's a school, maybe that's a big name or a D1 school doesn't mean the coaching experience is going to be great. So really consider, okay, who's going to be my coach for 4 more years? Am I going to still get better as a player and continue to play the game that I love?
No, that's an excellent point. The player I was mentioning earlier that went away and came back and said, hindsight, I would have done this. That's what she said. She said during the recruiting process, she was kind of caught up in everything. And then once she got there, the situation was a lot different than what she had expected. And I tell the players too, I'm like, look, I'm not only choosing, you guys, or I'm seeking out you, or I'm recruiting you. I said, at the end of the day, I said, you and your parents have selected me and selected my program. And I said, and not forever. I will always be grateful for that because it is a two-way street. It is when they join too. I tell them communication, that's big with me. I want you to tell me, what's going on. But it I think a coach is huge as far as having my kids, if my older ones had played, you have some coaches that are really good at it. From the communication side, then you have others not so much. And it can really affect a player.
Well, Mark, this has been really great and just such a nice inside look on JUCO and why players should consider it and just all of the amazing benefits. And I'm actually going to include your Twitter link in the description below so everyone can follow you and reach out and stay connected. If you're in the Tampa area, be sure to say hi to Mark or give him a
Yes.
visit like I did a few months ago. He is right down
Thank
the
you so much
road.
for that.
Yeah, that was really fun, and I'm hoping to come back in the fall for maybe a training session, but yeah, this has been such an awesome conversation, and everyone, I will see you on the next episode.